And now we have, ladies and gentlemen, our final speaker before we go into the fireside chat. And our final speaker of the day is Ishveen Jolly, who runs a fantastic business that is all about connecting sports people and brands and networks, and it's a really cool business. So please welcome Ishveen Jolly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ishveen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Open Sponsorship. I have to admit, I love the statement, chance prefers the prepared mind. I came in and thought I was doing a bit of a fireside with David, and I'm talking at you for 20 minutes, so bear with me if I look at notes. So we are the largest marketplace connecting brands to professional athletes. I absolutely love that. Jane earlier talked about how she had David Beckham, and it really helps her business, being able to talk about him and what she does. And I'm sure all of you in the audience who has a company is like, gosh, we would love to work with David Beckham or anyone who is an athlete for our business to say how great it is. And that's what we're doing. So I used to be a sports agent and thought, why is it so inaccessible to get these deals done? Why is there not an Airbnb for our industry? That's what we started. Today, we have over 12,000 athletes. We've done deals for as big as the Venus Williams, Premier League footballers like Jack Harrison, Olympians, blah, blah, blah. We're mostly based in America, and so we work with the likes of Walmart, Foot Locker, Levi's, kind of you name it. So I'm going to spend the time today talking about two traits that make me successful, and I say successful because I think everyone always feels like there's more to go, and imposter syndrome, blah, blah. And then two traits that have helped us to raise money. So we've raised over $5 million today from investors as big as David Blitzer, who owns Crystal Palace, superstar athletes, VCs, etc. So my first trait. A lot of people will always ask me, how did you have the courage to do X? How did you become a sports agent? How did you get into Oxford? How did you move to America? How did you do X? And I always say, well, I backed myself. And I'd love for you guys to take a moment to think, when was the last time you had an idea and thought, I can't do that? It's too risky. No one will believe in me. It's, I don't know, what will people think? Do you back yourself? And from the youngest age, I think I've always backed myself. So I graduated from Oxford. I was a student athlete. And like many other people, I went into the city. I was a management consultant. And I thought, gosh, I love my job. I love the people. But is this what I really want to do? So at 24, which sounds a bit crazy now, 2009, I moved to India and joined the IPL, the Indian Premier League. And everyone thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was crazy. They were really annoyed at me. My friends were like, what the hell are you doing? When I came back to London in 2012, everyone was like, are you crazy? You're coming back. You're leaving it. Just goes to show, right? And that was for me going, well, I backed myself again. And then personally, I met what I thought was the love of my life, moved to New York after 6 months of meeting him. 8 years later, found out he wasn't the love of my life, came back to London. Point being is, I just backed myself, personally and professionally. And I'd say, if you don't back yourself, you can really not be a successful entrepreneur. It's just too hard. Second, I never stop learning. I read a quote the other day, and it said, if you are not still learning, you're already dying. And I think so many of us go, we don't have time to read. We don't have time to think about personal growth. It's indulgent if we learn something new. It's not. It's all about investing in yourself and growing and learning that makes you successful. And I know Bente was talking about it earlier. At first, you're an entrepreneur. You need to do everything. You need to be the finance person, the marketing person, the salesperson. Then you hire people and you become a CEO. And you need to learn how to manage people. Recently, I needed to learn how to manage managers, which was completely new for me. I didn't even think about the fact that I needed a new skill set. And so you'll only grow if you're learning, but it's not just professional, it's personal too. I think there's so much talk. Obviously, Olivia did a whole talk about mental health and trauma and raising money. It's basically rejection after rejection, right? That's all it is. And we are wired to run away from rejection. That's why I think women don't raise as much money. Obviously, society needs to change, but I think we as women also need to think about, okay, this is rejection. Are we preparing ourselves to be rejected, right? And it only takes one to get started, and we'll talk about that in fundraising. But you need to prepare yourself by learning about how to deal with rejection, how to deal with putting yourself out there, how to be uncomfortable. And I think as women, we do have different challenges as our male counterparts when it comes to these things. A great example is when I went out and started the company, I didn't ask for any family and friends investment. And I had a good pedigree. I mean, I really believed in the business. I was off, but I just refused to ask family and friends. Ego, maybe it was like fear or whatever else. I recently angel invested in a friend of mine's company. I love it. I'm so proud. I talk about it all the time. I'm so grateful for her for letting me invest in her company. But look at that mindset change. 7 years ago when I started my company, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to ask people for money. Like, that's crazy, these people that know me. And now I look back and I think, gosh, what an idiot. Like, how privileged would they be to sit alongside some of the investors that I have? And I never gave them the opportunity. So I think when I talk about learning, I think if you can learn how to have the confidence and get over your fears, it will really help you. So my 2 tips on fundraising. One is, it's just tough. It really, really is just tough. Like, it's tough and you can make your life easier, but just recognize it's tough, right? And there are so many easier things to do in life than being an entrepreneur and then raising money. I was at the Super Bowl recently, one of the perks of my job. I get to go to cool sports events. And I was at the Super Bowl and I was sitting in the audience, and I was on stage and I'm looking at people with fancy titles. VP at Google, CMO of this company. And I'm thinking, gosh, would it be just easier if I had one of those fancy titles at a corporate job? Like, what am I doing? And then I really started making a list of why am I doing this? Like, blah, blah, blah. A friend of mine who is more like a solo entrepreneur was like, well, we've bought the ability to play tennis at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I was like, I haven't bought the ability to play tennis at 2 p.m., dude. That's not my life. And so what I'd say is it's tough, and there are so many easier things to do. So make sure that you believe in your mission, one, and then do things that make fundraising easier. So you've heard a lot of it today, but I'll tell you again, accelerators. In 2016, I moved to San Francisco for 6 months and joined an accelerator called 500 Startups. One of the best decisions I've ever made. Did they take a chunk of equity that I'd like back? Yes. But is it worth it? Absolutely. Especially first-time founders. Join an accelerator. 2, do friends and family. Go to people who have the money to lose. And you're all sitting, we're in the London Stock Exchange, you know people who have money to lose, right? So them giving you 10K and being able to sit there at a dinner party talking about their investment, that's cool. That's worth it for them, right? 5K, 10K, whatever. The point being is, go to friends and family. Those are the people who are going to keep introducing you later and later and later on in life when you need bigger checks. 3, don't go strategic too quick. And people get surprised about this, but I'll give you an example. I was at a dinner party once, and back in my youthful days, I used to frequent a lot of nightclubs. And someone was saying, oh, this was a few years ago, and they were like, oh, there's this app that helps you book tables in nightclubs. And someone else was like, oh, but that's a rubbish idea. Everyone who needs it can get access. And I was like, well, and he was like, I know, I used to have a nightclub, and I would never use that. And I was thinking, well, no one from within the industry thinks there's a problem. If they thought there was a problem, they would have either solved it, or they're basically saying they're too stupid to solve it themselves, right? So when we first went out, I remember I was introduced to this quarterback called Joe Montana. Got on the phone with him, and he was like, listen, in my lifetime, no one will make a marketplace to do sponsorship deals. It's too personal. I was like, well, we're already doing it. No, it's not going to happen, not going to happen. All the sports agents said to us at the beginning, this is not going to happen, right? And so do you think a real estate agent could have created Street Easy? Do you think a bookshop owner could have created Amazon? Disruption happens from the outside. Your first checks mostly have to come from the outside. You're lucky if they come from the inside. People are just too close to it. My parents are doctors. If I show them a deck that's about medical, they're like, oh, that's not going to work. Of course they're going to say that's not going to work, right? It's the other people who go, oh, this is interesting. Maybe it could work. So don't go strategic too quick. One of the hardest things about fundraising is you need to have a narrative, a story. this could become $1 billion company, or we could have an exit, 100,000 or whatever it may be. But when they turn around and say, okay, but how much does it cost to acquire a customer? You need to know that number too. And having your brain go big, 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 and then like, but I know my details, I think, and especially as a woman, is one of the hardest things. Because guys can talk a big game, and then they can say like numbers and it's believed, whereas like we get in the weeds, it's like, you know, the preventative versus the other type of questions. But so for me, the second round that we just raised, which was our bigger one, I had a VP of finance who was a male, and I would, as soon as there was a question about numbers, I did economics at university, I can handle numbers, but as soon as there was a question, I was like, let him like almost just turn the other cheek so that I could stick to narrative, storytelling, and push that off. So if you have the ability to take someone in the room with you and split the numbers and not numbers, I just think it's easier. It was really hard the first time. Someone said it earlier. I think there was a question about it where you asked for advice and then you got your first investment. There is a phrase, ask for advice and you get money, ask for money, you get advice. Now, I don't know if it's true that ask for advice, you get money, but there you are. So, but I would say there is something in that, which is sometimes, especially if you've got time, the people you ask for advice can ultimately become your investors or the people who introduce you. So go out there and seek advice a lot, right? And that is, cold emailing investors does not work. But cold emailing people to ask for advice, if you have a good email, does work. And that can build the relationship. All right, last point. Think about the funding type you want, why, and what you're going to do with it. VC is not for everyone. We just raised our round, and even coming here, I'm like, oh, but we only raised 5 million, someone else has raised 50, right? And you've never achieved, you've never stopped, and then you've got investors. I basically work for my investors. I own 1% of my company, not obviously 100 at all. And it's one of those things where it's just not for everyone. I think the funding market today, I mean, there's obviously ways to go, is better than it's ever been. There's government loans, there's Kickstarter campaigns, there's a lot of angel groups who are looking for like a 2-3 return X. There are, what else is, I mean, obviously like, you know more than me about everything of this, but the point being is there's a lot of funding types out there, and VC is very particular. And it's a good 6 to 9 month process to raise. Even if you're raising $1 million, it's going to be a 6 to 9 month process. Do you have that time to take out of running the business and put into just fundraising? And do you need it? And then the other thing is, things that you should think about. If you are going to use it, is it because you need to be able to hire engineers? If you're going to hire engineers, get it. Like, you need to be able to, we've just put out an offer to someone right now, and we're competing with Google to try and get this person. That's pretty scary. If I didn't have VC funding, I'm not competing with Google. And even still, I don't want to be competing with Google. But the point being is that think about what you're building, and do you need VC funding? Because I think it is much easier to build a nice lifestyle business that can still exit without VC. I'll stop there. I don't even know how long I took, sorry. I thought, well, okay. Yeah, awesome.
Wonderful, thank you. Right, questions down the front here to start. Anyone else to the next one? Over there. Okay, perfect. Right here.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much energy. Wow. Great. Question I do have is about valuation. And you talk about stake in your business now being taken by somebody else, and now you effectively will be co-running the business in a way. So any tips on the actual valuation and how to hold your cool, basically? Thanks.
I think that it was said earlier as well, like take money, be thoughtful about who you take money from early on. I think you're very lucky if you can even do that. I think it's who do you get money from and what are they ready to give you. There are standard things, like in tech, for example, like everyone at a seed round these are American numbers, but I'm sure they're probably similar here. But like in tech, your first round is usually done at like a 5 million valuation, unless if you're a second-time tech founder, completely different. Then you can charge whatever you want. But if you're unknown and you're going out for the first time, your first round is probably done at like 5. Your second round is probably done anywhere between like 10 to 20. It's also about how much you're going to take on. So we went out to try and raise 7 at a much higher valuation, and the market was we were just coming out of COVID, and it was quite tough, and it's sports. And so we lowered what we were going to raise, dropped our valuation. So I think it's also like a percentage of what you're going to take. It's so complicated with valuations. I think your first round, take what you can. Your second round, try and make... For me, if I was going to do it again, it would probably be like, first round, take what you can, take a little bit just to get you going. We didn't move fast enough, move fast with it. Your second round, try and make strategic so that it gives you validation. You can use it to basically grow. And then your third round should be easy based on the second round of investors. So now the jump from here to our next round should be huge in terms of valuation so I don't lose again, is the way I think about it.
I'm just going to jump in with an observation and, in fact, 2 observations. So first up, you said early on, invest in your own education. And I just want to re-emphasize that to the audience. So I trained as an accountant. When I left PwC, I went to work for a big tech company, and we had an education division. And the managing director of our education division had a poster in his office, and I'll never forget. It said, if you think education's expensive, try ignorance. Mm-hmm. So invest in yourselves. It will be the best money that you'll ever spend. So just 100% supporting of that. The other is an observation. Valuations in the US are higher than they are here. I'm sorry, it sucks, but that's life. And so, early round valuations, if you can get a 5 million valuation, you've done very well. Okay. But anyway, and linked to that, once you have raised some money, one of the first people you should bring in, and you've already touched on this, is a qualified finance person. And I'm not saying that because I'm an accountant. I'm saying that because that's someone who can come in and just be all over your numbers for you, because as soon as you have investors, you have got to be all over your numbers. And if you're not a numbers person, get one in, hire them. Thank you. Ayuna over there.
Thank you, Ishveen. I actually work at the London Stock Exchange, and I'm one of those who has this fancy corporate titles. But I have to admit...
I want to be you.
I have to admit, I wrote down everything you said. I was literally standing here typing down everything. It was so on point, so smart, so insightful. So thank you so much for this. My question for you is, do you feel, after sort of 2-3 rounds of financing, do you feel that you've given up a little bit more of your control that you wish to be? And do you feel like you are able now to make those strategic, as a founder, to make those strategic decisions? And the reason I'm asking is not to be, it's for us, for the London Stock Exchange, we are actually trying to navigate the private markets as well. So for us, this feedback from you would be really helpful.
Yeah. So I've not given up so much control that I'm like a majority shareholder, obviously, still in the company. It's just, I'll give you an example. Our first round was convertible notes, which is very common. You come out of an accelerator. These notes have an interest rate. They're essentially debt, right? We did our first round in 2016, and the interest rates in America, booming. I didn't even think about these clauses. We had lawyers that we were paying way too much money to help us out with this shit. We did take longer than we wanted to raise our second round, right? Which is, tales for another time. But when we sat down to convert, 8% interest rates on our notes. Sucked. Now, we got around it by doing some stuff that potentially should have pissed off our early investors, but because they had 8% interest rates, I was like, dude, you're fine. But the point being is, that I would say it's these little things that knock at you about giving away the company. So I think raising in itself, we just extended our round. We were going to raise 3.5, 4, and then we got in, soon to be announced, like a major athlete, like one of the best in the world to come in, and she wanted to put in like a big check, and it was that or nothing. And the upside of having her was better than like the share I gave away. So I think when it comes to giving away equity, it's all about value, right? And it's like, you know, if I give it to an accelerator, they gave me so much, great. If I give it away because of 8% interest rates, I'm crying, right? And so I think these are the kind of things. So I still work. I think when founders start thinking they're hard done by, and then they start losing motivation, that's when it causes issues. But that doesn't usually happen. Like I did discuss it with like my VP finance. I was like, oh, should I be? Because also I got hit with the biggest dilution when this athlete came in. So I was like, should I be trying to re-up myself out of our option pool? Because it's almost like I'm being punished for doing a great job at fundraising. And then he was like, look, honestly, Ish, like, don't you think you being able to say this person's on your cap table is worth more than a couple of %? And you're like, when you put it like that, fine. So I think ultimately, and then the annoying thing is that I will say is like investors, when they come in and they'll battle you for like all the cents and the percentages and whatever else. But when you turn around to get a percentage, they'll go, oh my gosh, this is so short-sighted. I mean, aren't you trying to become $1 billion company? What is 1 or 2% here? And you're like, wait, but when you wanted the 1 or 2%, like that was fine. So I think it's like, I still feel like I've got full control of what I can do. And honestly, like your investors, they're investing as much in the founding team. Up until, I mean, you guys probably know better. I presume it's like Series D level when they start investing in the business versus the founding team. But seed A, B, C, I'm like, they're still investing in me. And therefore, it's my voice and whatever else, right, at this point.
Hi, cheeky question. I heard you say co-founder. Mm-hmm. Was that a legacy from the accelerator, and is it a he or a she?
Yeah. So I was a solo founder, and in equity, I suppose I'm still technically a solo founder. I started the company, and I'm non-technical. And so one of the hardest things if you're starting a tech business is finding a technical person to help you build it. And so after a few iterations of trying to find a CTO, we brought on this guy who, after a year, I was like, you're amazing. We get on really well. And it's not just like he's great at tech. It's like we as culturally like match. So he is he, but he's also black and gay. So between us, we've got every diversity tag. We're like, we walk into any room and we're like, we're done. That's good, yeah. So basically, it was just like, culturally, we did really well. And actually, it's interesting that I was in a pitch quite early on, and they said to me, are you a solo founder? And I said, yes. And the guy ask for money, they give you advice. The guy went, if you think that this person is your person, you should ask them to be your co-founder. And I was like, why? And he was like, well, because they're less likely to leave the business versus if they're just a CTO. And so then I sat down with him and said, listen, and it was like proposing to someone. I was like, do you want to become my co-founder? This is what it'll mean. And it literally, like, he, like, welled up, and he was like, really? And the other thing is that, like, so I would say that it's for me, it's so nice to have a co-founder. And again, it's like, going back to equity, like, is it worth giving up equity? Now, if he had said, I want half of your equity, and I'd been running it for a year and a half, and it was my business and whatever else, I probably would have been like, But, like, is it worth having that security in someone else there? For sure.
And did you have to give a lot of equity? Does it have to be even-ish?
No. Well, how good a negotiator are you? That's all on you. So, yeah.
I'm just going to jump in again there, and I've got a mic on my lapel. But one of the things that I talk about in my book is, and a lot of founders get really caught up on this expression, giving away equity. Don't ever give away equity. Exchange it for something of equal or greater value. So bringing in a technical co-founder and granting that person 5, 10, 15% of the company is a smart thing to do. Bringing in someone when you're competing with Google is a smart thing to do because they're at that level. And what you need to think about is not, this is my pie and I own all of it, but how big can the pie be? And if you only own half of it, but the pie is 10 times the size, you're sitting on 5 times the value versus what you've got when you have just this yourself. And you really, really need to get comfortable with the idea of other people having an ownership stake in your business if you want to grow and scale, because they will bring money and contacts and abilities and networks that will be so much more than just the value of the cash coming in. So please, if there's only one thing you take away from me, it's never give away equity. Exchange it for something of equal or greater value. It's your most valuable currency.
I'm just going to, on that note, I think, again, maybe a female thing, maybe it's everyone, but this idea of like the pie is this big and then, it doesn't, your share is bigger. I think it can be quite hard to sit down, especially even if you think you have a really good idea, to go, okay, well, but this could become like $1 billion company, right? Like, crazy people think like that. I'm going to create a unicorn, right? And so even now, like I was actually with one of our investors recently, and he was like, what do you need help with? And I was like, I need someone who can help me see the path to $1 billion, right? Or at least see the path, right? Whether we get there or not, but I need to see that path. And so I'd say, back to your point, which is even the exchange of equity might be to someone who can help you think of it, how big it can be. Because that for me is the biggest challenge, which is like, oh, really? I'm gonna become the next CAA, right? Like they're going to make movies about what we've done. Like I read Shoe Dog. I don't know. It's the book about Nike, right? And Phil Knight talks about how like they were a group of misfits in this room, and all the fitness and apparel industry had grown out of Germany. Everything. And these were like these Americans. And now you think, God, how could Nike not have become Nike? But when he talks about it, he's like, we were doing the impossible. And so I'd say, I think one of my friends, the one I was talking about, who I invested in, she was the same way, couldn't really think about it. And then she got her chairman, who used to be the CEO of British Gas, I think, or something like that. And so essentially he was the one who said, okay, this is how you become this huge company. And so I think one of the things is we need people around us who can help us to think how big this can this grow, so that we don't mind giving up an extra 10%, because you're like, well, it's not it's not 10% of a 10 million business, it's a 10% of like a $400 million business kind of thing. So yeah, I don't think it comes naturally to us. We probably need to get people to help us see that.
Terrific. I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you so much, Ishveen. And thank you. And just make sure, yeah, that's for you. Wonderful. Thank you.